My name is Robert Del Tredici. I'm a photographer. I also teach animation, and I am an artist. I draw a lot.
I didn't know that you also had I didn't know that you had a multidisciplinary practice.
Yeah, I don't do animation, but I've taught animation, a history of it, the art of it, for many years. I love it.
Is that topic also related to nuclear landscapes, or?
I don't know. I don't know what the connection is, except that I'm a very visual person, and nothing is more visual than animation. So I think that's the link, how to make the dynamics of visual language, how to make them work for you. And animation does it so well.
So can you share a little bit about the context for how the Atomic Photographers Guild was formed? And what kind of photography had you been working on at the time and doing? And then how did you connect with others who had this kind of interest?
Well, my first nuclear adventure was to document the accident at 3 Mile Island in southeastern Pennsylvania, which it turns out was a very serious accident, an actual meltdown. So all the people who were saying that they had rashes, they had miscarriages, their animals were dying, there were holes in trees, and they tasted metal in their mouths. All these things were simply dismissed because they didn't want to believe that. But about 4 years later at 3 Mile Island, they got a probe into the crippled reactor, and sure enough, it was a meltdown. About 45% of the core had melted. When you have a melt like that, you can calculate the gases that will escape. And the calculation was that an enormous amount of gases escaped. And all these things that the people were saying were true, whether they weren't what the industry called radiophobia. These people are just spooked. No, they were actual results. So that was my first experience in the nuclear realm. I didn't know anything about nuclear. But after that, I decided, it was now 1982, and that was the beginning of Helen Caldicott's series of speeches where she bombed every city that she was in great detail. She was a doctor and very concerned about the bomb and radiation. And 1982 was a critical moment because that's when Ronald Reagan deployed mid-range missiles in Europe for the first time, aimed at the Soviets, and the Soviets were planning counter-aiming. And people were up in arms, and that's when Jonathan Schell wrote his classic book, The Fate of the Earth. He wrote that during that period, where he identified nuclear winter as a hidden problem underneath it all. Helen Caldicott would go to many cities, and in every city, she would give very specific descriptions of what would happen if there was a H-bomb explosion over the city.
Every person out to a radius of 6 miles from the epicenter would be vaporized, just turned into gas.
And she would have streets and buildings and population counts, and just give everybody a terrible fear and terror of the situation. And I thought this was very interesting, very compelling. But after I'd been bombed by her about 3 times in 3 different places, I grew tired of that because I thought, okay, it's absolutely sensational. But what about the fact that I'd also heard that the reason these events are possible is that they make up to 6 new warheads every day in the United States? And I thought, what about that? And so I got interested immediately in the bomb factories, about which I knew nothing. But I dug and met people and talked to them and found out that there are 12 H-bomb factories splayed across the United States in an arc. Each one does something different. They don't communicate so well with each other, but they send their product, whatever it is, to the final assembly plant outside Amarillo, Texas. And furthermore, they had public relations officials on site to deal with members of the press And furthermore, the airspace above them was not classified because they were near cities, and you can't forbid airspace because you got a lot of commercial traffic. So they had a limit. You can't go lower than 2,000 feet, but that's a commercial limit. That's not a security limit. So I thought, okay, I have a chance. I can talk to security people. I can talk to public relations people, and I can fly. I can hire a small airplane and get aerials. But I didn't feel like I had what it took to start knocking on bomb factory doors, okay? It's like Darth Vader time. And I just didn't know how I could do that. And then I got the bright idea to go to a place where people knew the real meaning in human terms of the bomb. And it wouldn't be the United States of America, which had already dropped 2 of them and had tested hundreds of them. They didn't know the meaning of the bomb in human terms. But the Hiroshima and Nagasaki people did. So I went to Hiroshima and to Nagasaki to find the meaning of the bomb. And at first, because I'm American, I'm a dual citizen actually, but because I'm American, I thought they wouldn't want to talk to me because Americans did all this horror to them. But it wasn't the case at all. They looked at me and they assessed me for what I came for. They took me at my word. I wanted to know what the human meaning of the bomb was. And they jumped to help me out. So that was great. When I asked them to tell me what it was like when the bomb fell, in every case when I talked to a survivor, at a certain point they burst into tears. So it's like asking somebody, what was the most painful moment of your life? Could be your divorce or some horrible accident that a loved one had, whatever it was deeply personal. And they burst into tears. And I said that I was here because I wanted to photograph the bomb factories in the United States. And one aged survivor came up to me and said, yes, you must do this. And that was it. That gave me the permission, so to speak, to do that. And after that, I could go knock on bomb factory doors. And I went to Hiroshima 3 times and met a lot of wonderful people. And I came away with the principles that they said, this is the meaning of the bomb. The meaning of the bomb is threefold. 1, if you weren't there when it occurred, you could have no idea what went on because it wasn't a giant firecracker. It was a cosmic explosion that had never happened before on Earth. So what happened if you weren't there? You missed it totally. Point 2 is this must never happen again to anyone for any reason. There's no reason that justifies the annihilation of an entire city or more. There can be none. And the third point was nuclear weapons and human beings cannot coexist. And I thought about that a lot. I liked the sound of it. But it seemed to me maybe they were wrong because we do coexist, right? In spades. But then I thought more about it. And I thought that surely they're aware of that. The conclusion I came to was that what they are saying is being a human being and holding nuclear weapons ready to use are inconsistent with each other. And you are no longer human if you're willing to use these weapons. And however you define humanity, it includes sharing, treating others as you would treat yourself, helping people and the environment and Earth flourish, all of those wonderful things. It does not include, on a spur of a moment, pressing a button and annihilating vast numbers of people. That is not human. It's something else. So I went back and I started going to all the different bomb factories and renting airplanes and flying over and talking to local people who lived around the plants, farmers, housewives, victims of the plant's radiation, things like that. And in the process of that, I would cross paths from time to time with other photographers. Now, nobody was undertaking what I was to get all the bomb factories, all 12 of them. But they were doing things here and there, or smaller things. At this plant, there was something going on. Or they were interested in uranium mining. Or they were interested in fallout from the Nevada test site in Utah. Big, important pieces, but I seemed to be the only one who's taking on the whole thing. And as a result, I met a number of wonderful photographers who wanted to make the whole thing visible, because as apocalyptic as it was culturally invisible. Nobody knew how many bomb factories there were, where they were, or that you could go and visit them. And I got permission to go inside 6 of the 12 bomb factories. You might think, well, it's top secret, but the things that are actually top secret are technical things, like the size of the filters in a gaseous diffusion plant. But the actual operations, the day-to-day ordinary stuff, is not classified. I would meet with these public relations people, and they would say, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't want to take pictures of anything that's top secret, not interested. But I do want to photograph the things that are able to be photographed. And they said, well, okay, who are you with? That's very important. No, most important, are you an American citizen? Because if you're not, you're an alien. And they don't like aliens sniffing around their bomb factories. So I'm not an alien. And who are you with is the second question. So I had a Canada Council grant to begin this project. And the Canada Council, like many institutions in Canada, is a crown corporation of the Canadian government. So when they say, who are you with? I said, I'm with the Crown Corporation of the Canadian government. And that shut them up immediately. They didn't know what it meant, but it sounded official. So they said, okay. And that's how I got into 6 of the bomb plants.
Well, I mean, what kind of work had you been doing before that? And what was that like for you as a photographer to go into these kind of strange places with machines and shiny things?
I loved every aspect of it, because I knew that no one had done this. One factory that I went into said, the worker, somebody accompanies you, and he said, I've been here 30 years and I've never once seen a camera inside this place. So I knew that this was, that I had managed to get into these corners and nooks and crannies of this enormous complex in a way that had not happened before. And I did it by being very polite. And also I had, in a galaxy far away, I had studied to be a Catholic priest in a seminary. I went there for a total of 8 years. And then I quit, which was very traumatic, but I did anyway. And when I met the people who in the bomb factories, they were the same psychological types as the priests in the seminary. And I thought, well, there's parallels here. They're speaking in favor of a great force that can either save you or destroy you. They're sworn to secrecy. They're very devoted, and so forth. So I felt I knew the people that I was among, and I was able to speak to them without getting angry or upset. And when I photographed Paul Tibbets, the man who coordinated the dropping of the atomic bombs, the end of World War II, and they were ready to drop as many as 15 bombs, but only 2. But I visited him in his office in Ohio, took a wonderful picture of him standing at his desk, looking up into the horizon. And I showed it to a friend of mine, and he said, how could you be in the same room as that monster? And I just said, that's why I got the shot and you didn't, okay? Because it wasn't my job to judge him. He'd been judged as much as it's possible to be judged, millions of times over, and he was still fine. So my words, whatever they might be of censure, would not have had any effect at all.
I know you produce books, but what platforms did you plan for these photographs?
A book. It was always to be a book, yeah.
What about that form for you? Why not a gallery exhibition, or why the book form for you?
Gallery shows come and go like mayflies, but a book remains. And this is before the digital age, by the way, so it wasn't an option to publish it on the internet, which I don't think is all that great anyway, but I like books. I've always liked books.
That kind of statement that the book lasts is something that educates people who don't know about this kind of thing. That's why I asked.
That's a lot of people don't know all that stuff that we grew up with. Yeah, like books and how to tell time with a clock that has numbers on it. All sorts of things. But a book just seems to me a beautiful, valuable, enduring thing.
What was the reception to the books that you were producing? Were people amazed at the breadth of what was happening in the United States and seeing these spaces that they'd never seen before? Did you get any feedback from the people that you photographed or the sites?
Yes, all of those things. And you say books. I'd only done one book before, and that was on 3 Mile Island. That was my first book. And then that took 1 year, which I thought was a long time. And then I got the idea to do this, and it took 6 years. So I realized that a 1-year book project is quick, but 6 years is what it took to finish the Hbombs thing. And it won an award. It won the Olive Branch Book Award for its contribution to world peace. So that got that recognition, and I've had a number of interviews and a bunch of shows with this material. So people don't quite know what to make of it because they've never seen any of it before. And it's this huge, sprawling, old complex. But people liked it. They thought it was an important thing to have done.
Were there particular influences on you as a photographer? Were you inspired by a particular photographer's work?
Yes. My favorite photographer is Cartier-Bresson, who erased the gap between inner and outer. He taught me that it's possible to be invisible when you're taking a picture. And I didn't quite know how he did it, but every picture of his, he could be 4 feet away from a couple at a cafe kissing and a dog at their feet looking at them eagerly. And he got that shot, and the dog didn't even notice him taking it. So I love that. I love getting close to people, capturing expressions and emotions, and also superb composition. That he was faster than a tennis champion in terms of getting right there in the spot, taking it. So that was a big inspiration. And he, turns out, had been an artist before he was a photographer, and that was my position as well. And when you come from that background, you're used to controlling everything in the frame, everything. Every little thing, a tree, a mailbox, an old tire, and the people. I also loved August Sander, not Cartier-Bresson at all, but the portrait of humans in the 20th century. And I loved that whole approach. And it's very straightforward, but you can't imitate those pictures. You can't go and do the same thing. He brought to it something that was unique, and I never got tired of looking at his pictures. And I also like Ouija, Ouija the famous, because he brought incredible energy and humor to the most ghastly things imaginable. So those were things that really enlivened me and taught me that photography can be something, a real art form, very exciting one.
So each of the images in the exhibition actually kind of seem to reflect different styles and different approaches. Could you just share a little bit about the making of the White Train assembly plant? You were talking about that at the beginning, I think, or the context for that.
Okay, and
was that was made from a plane, correct?
It was either a plane or a drone, and it didn't have
Yeah.
back then. So yes, it was a plane.
Was that one of the early images that you made in 1982?
Yes. And I was nervous. That's at the Pantex Nuclear Weapons Final Assembly Plant, and the White Train delivers finished warheads to the East Coast and West Coast submarine bases. And these are, very powerful multi-use warheads. I think they have like 16 weapons inside each warhead. They can destroy the whole world. And so when I went to the plane rental place, I didn't know whether I should admit that's where I wanted to go. I was thinking, saying, well, let's just fly outside Amarillo for a while and see what we can see. But I thought, no, that's not going to cut it. I'm going to be honest. I said, I want to photograph the Pantex nuclear weapon final assembly plant. Is that going to be okay? And the guy said, sure, we fly over it all the time. It was a non-issue. I said, great. So I didn't have to pretend that I was studying the wheat fields outside of Amarillo. What was your question?
I was just asking about how you produce that.
Well, so we flew over it, and there was the white train, and I knew about the white train, but it was unusual to see it. So I was lucky. I was lucky many times in that way. My rule is you must go to X marks the spot. You have to go where it happens. And when you get there, you have no idea what you're going to find. So what is it? A huge, long white train, rather boring, graphically speaking, but I put it in a diagonal. And that was the only thing I could do. We couldn't fly lower, get a close-up. So it turns out that diagonal of the entire train was accurate way to represent that thing. So I don't have an idea ahead of time. I just respond to the energy and the graphics in front of me, you know. But sometimes, you know, I can travel 2,000 miles to go to a factory without any idea of what it looks like. And then I get there and it's totally boring. It's just a big cement structure. And there's no way to photograph it in an interesting way. And then I would see, well, there's a chain link fence. I can photograph it through the chain link fence. And then it looks interesting. Yeah. So I always got at least one good shot for every long trip I made. And that's all I needed. Although,
and how did you get into the Senate hearing room for the Operation Crossroads?
Well, they're not closed. They're open. It's just somebody told me about it.
I guess now.
That was different back then. Yeah. But what I had no idea I would find would be a tabletop polished to perfection so that it acted just like a mirror. And so I got this Lieutenant Colonel Pickett. His reflection was reflected upside down in the shiny tabletop, and I thought, it's like Alice in Wonderland. Because what he's saying is completely untrue. He said, oh, the exposures for the first bomb test after Nagasaki, they were very minimal and nobody was damaged. And the reason they were having this hearing is it was 30, 40 years later, and the latency was coming due and people were dying. And he was still holding the government mantra that nobody was injured. So it was like Alice in Wonderland.
Another kind of Alice in Wonderland is a strange photograph, all the nuclear warheads. Where is that? What was that?
That's called an installation. That's by Barbara Donachai. And like me, she wanted to make visible the magnitude of this problem. And so she heard that there had been 25,000 nuclear warheads created by the government because of the Cold War. And she asked herself, what does 25,000 of something look like? Because you can say there's 25,000 and you can, yeah, okay, you agree. But the truth is you don't know first thing about how that would look, what that would amount to. So she made 25,000 ceramic nose cones in miniature and deployed them on the floor. And it took a long time to set it up, you can imagine. Her impulse was to render it visible, which was exactly my impulse too. So I was thrilled when I had a chance to photograph that.
And so the work of the Guild continues today.
Yeah.
How many members are in it now?
About 35 members. Some drop out, some come in. Mm-hmm. And the requirement that we have is that you have to be in it for the long haul. Some people do a one-shot thing. They'll photograph a missile silo and they want to join the Photographers Guild. And you have to be in it for the long term, because this is absolutely a long-term issue.
And in addition to these photographs in our exhibition, you obviously continued with a long career, including the amazing image in the background. Can you just share a little bit about your own kind of trajectory? I mean, you've got thousands of images.
Yeah, my ratio, by the way, of good pictures to pictures that I shot is 300 to 1. For every 300 pictures, I would get one good picture. And it had to be a good picture. If it wasn't a good picture, I don't care what it was. It was out. It had to be interesting.
And maybe you could share your criteria for the good picture.
Well, it has to be interesting to look at. And if people say, wow, then you've succeeded. Yeah, so it has to elicit some form of the word wow. And that's what I would do with my photo students. We'd be in the darkroom and I'd be helping students print. And I said, oh, I cut off his head. This picture isn't any good. I said, no, that's why it's good, because you cut off his head a little bit. And so print it, I'm going to show you something. So they'd make a print. And then I would tap the next person in the booth next to me in the dark. And I wouldn't say a word. I'd hold up the picture. It'd be a big print. And they'd say, wow. I said, okay, I read my case.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
And so now you're actually working on your archives.
Well, it's a double project. To work on the archives, yes. I'm not looking forward to it, but it's like doing a deep dive into a hidden place. But I'm also, I recently got another grant from the Canada Council to document the cleanup of Port Hope, Ontario, the most radioactive town in Canada. It's also the site of the world's biggest and first uranium refinery back in the 30s. But they were very, very careless with their wastes. They would dump the waste, nuclear waste, into ravines. They would cart it out to the dump. People from Port Hope would go to the dump and take these building materials and this sandy waste that were all radioactive and use it for construction. End result was that homes all over Port Hope, and it's a small town, 16,000 people, they would make cement for their basements, which would issue radon gas, which is a big cause of lung cancer. And they finally, after many years, initiated a cleanup in this small town. And the plant is saying, well, it's really harmless, actually. But you want to know what the cost of the cleanup is in this small town? $1.2 billion. That's how harmless it is. And to me, it triggers a tectonic shift from the age of nuclear reactors to the age of nuclear waste. We are now in the age of nuclear waste. It's just beginning. And this huge project in this small town is kind of on the cutting edge of that. So I thought, this is important. This deserves to be documented. And I knew about Port Hope, and I've been going there on and off for 10 years, taking all kinds of pictures. And now I had a real project, the cleanup. So I have as a background all these pictures of the town and parades and the plant. And now I can focus them like a laser into this project.
So this time, when they ask who you're with, you can also say who you're with. You're with the government this time.
I'm with the Canada Council, yeah. Yeah.
Caroline, do you have any questions that you want to ask? Or
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, which is pretty close to Harrisburg. But, growing up, I never actually remember hearing anything about 3 Mile Island. I could see the Salem nuclear power plant in New Jersey across the bay, but even after that was briefly shut down in 2013 for safety issues, and even after Fukushima, there was, still no comparisons to 3 Mile Island. You touched on this a little bit, but do you find that people are less aware of nuclear issues currently, that there's been a dip in awareness? And, what's something that you'd want to say to citizens living nearby nuclear power plants or nuclear waste sites currently?
Don't breathe. Yeah, I think there's a tremendous lack of knowledge and a lot of denial. It's thick as marble. And there are always people who are learning about it. So that's kind of like the cutting edge of a wave. That's why I like picturing the background of those women. They're just finding out what had happened to them over the last 40 years. And we're kind of all in that position. Some people get it earlier, some people later, some people never get it. But I've decided that working in an atmosphere of denial is never going to change it, The amount of people who don't want to face it and don't know about it outnumbers those people. So how do you work on a life and death issue which is smothered in denial? How do you do that? Well, it takes patience. And bombs are like that too. People say at the drop of a hat, they keep us strong, But it's a hell of a way to be strong. And I thought the bomb industry was impenetrable. So I thought to myself, I'm just going to sit in front of this problem. I'm going to imagine it as a sheer cliff, a solid granite cliff. And just going to sit here. That's it. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm just going to sit here in front of it. And something happened after about 4 years of just feeling that way. And that is, gradually the wall became transparent. And I could see right through it and all the activities and everything. It was very interesting. It was a surprise. And enabled me to move much more freely through it, instead of running away from it or complaining that nobody would let me do anything. It just opened. But it took that amount of time.
Wow, Robert. Thank you for that.
That's my advice to people is when you see something horribly evil and you can't stand it, just sit in front of it and wait it out. It's possible for things to change in subtle ways, I think. And when I was working on the bomb book for about 3 years, my friends would say, shouldn't you be burned out by now? And I said, no. Every time I put an X after one of the bomb plants that I've just photographed, I feel energized. And until I get all 12 of them X'd out, I'm just going to keep going.
Thank you so much, Robert. You've given us so many wonderful things to think about, or not wonderful, but provocative things to think about. And you speak so beautifully that it's just been really moving to listen to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And they are wonderful. These things are wonderful. You can't say they're horrible. They are horrible too. But there's a wonder in it, and getting to what it actually, what's going on, because we still don't know very much, you know? Tip of the iceberg. But wonder is a very good, like curiosity, it's a good approach to something that most people would want to run away from.
It's true. You know, people ask, well, why do you want to do these kinds of topics? And you have to have a sense of wonder and curiosity about them in order to do this work.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say one more thing, Makeda.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, the title of your show is Devour the Land. And I thought about that in terms of the nuclear picture. And yes, nuclear weapons devour the land, but they also attack the gene pool. It's a different dimension, but they ransack the gene pool like madmen, going through it without knowing what they're doing, destroying right, left, and center with no idea how long it will last. It will last, by many accounts, basically forever. It will alter the structure of the human identity. So devouring the land is appropriate for regular war, but devouring the gene pool is what nuclear weapons do. So it takes it down a deeper level. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it comes from the words of General Sherman, who developed this idea as a policy.
It's a different breed of devouring altogether, and most people don't see that. But there it is.
Thank you so much for your time. Your perspective is just so singular in this way, and so I really just appreciate you joining me.